me on this journey where my plan is to help encourage everyone, regardless of where you are in the writing process, whether you're just starting out or you've been a writer with some success and maybe you haven't written in a while, or maybe you're just thinking about shifting gears and going in a different direction. Regardless of where you are, I want you to know that even though this is a lonely grind, sitting alone at our computers day after day, spinning our stories, we're all in this together. And I hope that we can create a community where we feel safe and we can talk about the challenges that we have and that together we can overcome them. So I want to tell you a little bit about my background and help you to understand where it is that I'm coming from with all of this. I have been writing, like I said, for a little over 20 years. When I went to school, I did not study to be a writer. I actually didn't have any idea what I wanted to do when I was in college. And after I graduated, I realized that I wanted to put the stories that were running through my head down on paper. And I kind of went about it the backwards way to try and figure out how to craft a readable, marketable story. I did all the wrong things and all the wrong orders, but after a number of years, I did achieve some success as a best-selling author on both the Amazon and Barnes& Noble bestseller list. And I've also won some prestigious awards for my writing as an unpublished writer and also as a published writer. So I have a master's degree in fine arts in creative writing from Goddard College. I have experience as a college professor. I've taught in creative writing programs. I've also taught high school. I've spoken at conferences and done lots of workshops for writers. And so I just wanted to make some of the things that I teach people in my workshops available on a broader basis through the internet. So I hope you will be excited about that because we're going to learn about all kinds of things. First, I want to tell you about a little bit more about my personal journey and what brought me to this place. I wrote for about 10 years trying to write for a particular publisher, and it was a 10-year process because I wrote 4 books for them. 2 of the books were actually one book. It was 2 versions of the same book. I had complete manuscripts requested. I won awards for all 3 of these novels. I came really close to selling to this particular publisher that I had targeted, but in the end, it wasn't meant to be. And so just to take a break from the grind of trying to write for that particular publisher, I decided to write something just for fun that was just for me. And so I wrote an 80-page short story and I took it to my critique group and they loved it and they encouraged me to expand it into something a little bit longer. So I added 100 pages, made it a novella, and I began to shop it around to different publishers. And the reaction was, this is really good, but we can't do anything with something this length. And so I decided to go an alternative route to get it published. And mind you, this was before self-publishing on ebooks. There wasn't a successful way to market ebooks at that time. So I went with a small press and had two books published through them. I took that 180-page novella. I added 100 pages to it at the request of this publisher, and it was published, that first book. And then the second book in this series was also published. And this was when print-on-demand books were brand new. And if you don't know what print-on-demand is, that means that there's not a print run. It means that when a book is ordered, it is printed at that time using digital technology. So that was a great thing that made publishing more accessible to a broader number of people who weren't going the conventional New York publisher route. The problem with that was those books were not returnable. So what that means is books ordered through print on demand from a bookstore could not be returned for a refund if they weren't sold. And this made booksellers not want to buy these books. So, long story short, as my husband liked to say, tens of people read my books. And I have to tell you that it was an exhausting experience because I went on the Grand Book Tour because the only way I could get bookstores to order my books was if I went and did a book signing. So at my own expense, I promoted this book, and tens of people read my books. And I collapsed in a heap of exhaustion and disappointment, and I had a long talk with my maker, and I agreed with him, or told him, that I had given this writing thing my best shot, and clearly it wasn't meant to be, and I was done. So for 5 years, I did not write a word. I completely gave it up. I pulled out of all the writers groups I've been in. I stopped attending writers workshops, conferences, and I mean, I went to 2 or 3 a year, and I just broke away from all of my writing friends because I just couldn't face anything that had to do with writing, because it was just a reminder of what a long and disappointing journey it had been for me. And so I started a new career in higher education, working with students with disabilities, and it was good work, and I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the people that I worked with, but it didn't feed my soul the way that writing did. And over the course of that 5 years, I became increasingly more and more dissatisfied and angry with everything. And one evening, I went out with a family member, and we were having conversation, and I was complaining and angry, and it was clear that I was. And she gently suggested to me that I'm really angry. She said, "Debbie, you're really angry." And I said, "Yeah, I am." And she said, "I think maybe you should talk to someone about that." And I said, "I am talking to someone about that. I'm talking to you." And she said, "No, I mean, I think you should talk to someone about that." And I was like a professional? And she was like, "Yeah." And so it just so happened there was a program through my work where you could go talk to a professional or someone like that for free for a certain number of times. And I thought, well, I am angry, and it would be good to talk out some things to get to the source of my anger, because, I had no idea why I was angry. And I made the appointment and I went. And so we started out, as these sessions start, with getting to know each other, and I gave her this long list of all these jobs I had done over the years. And in the list was I had published some novels. And she was fascinated by that. And she wanted to talk about that, but I did not want to talk about that because that is something that I had given up. And it was a very disappointing and frustrating time in my life, and I just didn't want to go there. So I would gently steer the conversation to something else that I thought was more the problem, and she kept gently steering it back to what she thought was the problem and wanted to talk more about the writing. And so finally I said, "Look, I don't write anymore, and that is something in my life that is very painful to discuss. And I don't want to talk about it." And that's like waving the red flag in front of a therapist to say, this is really painful, right? But I was a newbie at this, and so, I just told her exactly what she needed to hear. So she said, "Okay, well, here's the deal. You are in a deep depression." And I said, "Oh, no, I'm not depressed. I have family members who are depressed. I know what depression is. I'm not depressed." And she said, "Oh, okay, well, these are the markers for depression." And there were 3, and she named them, and I had them all. Big surprise. So I'm reeling from that because I know how difficult it is to live with someone who has depression, and that was very upsetting and hard for me to hear, that I too had depression. So while I'm reeling from that truth that she's just shared with me, On the heels of that, she says, if you want to get better, you have to start writing again. And at that point, I just started to weep. I mean, I could not imagine having to go back there and go how something that painful and going through that again could make me better. And I couldn't speak. I was so upset. And so she scheduled another appointment, and I was supposed to come back the next week, and I went home. I cried all the way home. I cried after I got home. And just to distract myself, I opened up my email. And there was an email there from the lady who had been my editor with that book deal that I had that hadn't gone the way I'd hoped that it would. And she said, there's a publisher who is starting a new line, and they're looking for stories with Southern settings. And if you have the rights back to those books, you should submit. And I knew the ladies who owned this publishing company. We had met when I was on the conference circuit, and I had gotten to know one of the two ladies fairly well. And so at this point, I started talking to God, and I said, okay, I get where this is going. The therapist told me I have depression, and if I want to get better, I've got to start writing again. I come home, and now I have this email from this editor whom I haven't heard from in ages saying, you should submit these books and give writing another go. So here's what's going to happen. I'm telling God this. I'm going to submit. They're going to tell me they're not interested, and I'm going to tell you and that therapist that I, indeed, am not meant to write because I knew best. So I sent an email to the one of the two women in the company that I knew the best and said, hey, I've got these books. I heard you're looking for Southern. They were published before, but hardly nobody read them because there was no distribution. And if you're interested, let me know. So she emailed me back and said, yeah, we are looking for Southern books, but I'm not doing the editing. Send them to my partner. So I sent the email to the other person in the company and gave them the same spiel, and she emailed me back quickly and said, yeah, if you have that first book in a PDF file, attach it to an email and I'll have a look. Now, mind you, it was odd to have a PDF of a book at that time because I had never, up until then, submitted a book via email. We always printed them out and mailed them in. And it just so happened that the person who had been my publisher before had made PDFs of the books, and she had shared them with me. So I did have a PDF, and I sent it to her. So I didn't think anything of it because I've been asked for complete manuscripts before, and nothing has happened with it. So I didn't think anything of it. So a few days later, I got an email from this editor, and this is all it said. This looks good. Send me the other one. Well, I'm still thinking, I've been asked for completes. Nothing's going to come of this. I'm not really giving it a lot of thought. So I sent her the other one, also as a PDF attached to an email. And literally the next day, and if you're keeping score here, we've gone from Tuesday to Saturday. On Saturday, she sent me an email that said, we would like to offer you a 3-book deal. We want to reissue these first 2 books, put them in new packaging with new covers, do a new edit on them, and we want you to write a 3rd book in this series. Are you interested? And I thought, you have got to be kidding me. Of course I agreed, and I had to go back to that therapist and tell her and God that they were right. Apparently I am meant to write, but did I mention that I hadn't written in 5 years? And did I mention that I had broken all contact with all of my writer friends who were all not happy with me, didn't want to talk to me? I'm not a member of any professional organizations anymore. I have no support for doing this other than my family saying, go Deb. So it just so happened that I had applied to graduate school. I'd been accepted, but I hadn't been able to begin because I was waiting for a tuition benefit to come through that had not come through. I had to pass on starting for 2 semesters, and if it didn't come through this 3rd semester, I was going to have to reapply. And right after I worked out this deal to do these books, the tuition thing miraculously came through. So I went to graduate school at Goddard. It was a low residency program where I went twice a year, and I stayed for a little over a week, and I did intensive workshops, and I worked out my program, and I came home and I worked the program from home, and I mailed in my work to an advisor and worked one-on-one with that person. It was a 4-semester program. It was the best thing that I ever did. It provided me with just a marvelous support system to start on this new journey of writing, because I knew going forward that the only way I would be able to do it was if I did everything different. I had to think about writing different. I had to think about selling books differently, that it was not all my responsibility, that part of it is just in God's hands. And I never worry about the money, and I only worry about writing the books. That's the only way I could do it. And the people in my program, including the director, the instructors, the other students in the program, were pure love and pure support for me in a time when I needed it so desperately. And I didn't share with them what I had been through. I didn't share with them what was going on. I just wanted them to meet me where I was in a new space so that I could get to a new place where I could create something better and different that would succeed. And the cool part of the story is that book that I wrote, that 3rd book, the book I wrote after I had not written anything for 5 years, won the Holt Medallion. And it was just validation that this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I was meant to do. And as another interesting side note, the money followed. I lost my job at the college where I was working in my last semester of my graduate program. But when my royalty check came that spring, I had been out of work for 2.5 months, and I had no prospects for another job. But that first royalty check that came after I lost my job was for more money than I made in half a year at the college. And it was just like God came down and sat down right next to me and said, "Debbie, I've got this. All you need to do is write the books." So that's my story. And I hope that you have somehow, on some level, connected with it, and that we can share more stories like that with each other. I hope you'll leave a comment below, and that you would consider emailing me at deborah@deborahgracestaley.com, and let me know what you think. And if there are any questions that you would like for me to address, I'd be happy to do that as well. So tune in again really soon, and be sure to subscribe to my channel so that you'll know when new videos are posted. Thanks, and have a blessed day.